Bob Wilson, a 32-year-old company employee, was a man of routine. He loved his job, but his routine was disrupted when he was called to a business negotiation by his female department head, Davis. Davis had a reputation for being difficult, and Bob was starting to wonder if she was deliberately making his life harder. He had a feeling he was being set up, but he went to the meeting anyway. When he arrived at the meeting place, he found himself surrounded by 7 large men. They all stared at him, their eyes like burning coals. It was clear they weren't there for a business deal. Bob's gut twisted with fear. Where was Davis? And then she appeared, a devilish smirk twisting her lips as she emerged from a back room. "Wilson, you really are a stupid boy, aren't you? Kid, huh?" Her voice dripped with disdain, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Does this look like a meeting place?" Bob swallowed hard. "It doesn't look like one, but this is the place you told me, right?" Davis laughed, a sound like nails scraping on a chalkboard. "That's right, but this isn't a meeting place. This is a punishment room I prepared just for you." Bob's heart pounded against his ribs. "A punishment room? You never listen to what I say, yet you keep getting good results. It's ruining my reputation. Even if you say that, I have my own way of doing things. I mean, that's just jealousy, isn't it? Please stop making such a fuss over something like that at your age." Bob knew he was in over his head. He had to try to reason with her. "Something like that? That can be. I've dedicated my entire life to work, and yet, to think I might lose to an upstart like you, I can't accept that. Please give me a break." Davis's smirk widened. "I think you need to cool your head a bit, Ms. Davis." Bob tried to negotiate. "Anyway, I won't tell anyone about this, so can I go home now? There's no meeting nor sales call today, right?" He tried to leave, but a giant of a man stood in his way. "Sorry, bro. That woman's paying us, Yano. Can't let you pass through here." Bob was trapped. He reluctantly turned back to Davis, his voice a mere whisper. "I humbly suggest that continuing this behavior won't benefit anyone. It's concerning to have work time cut short, and if the company finds out, it could lead to serious consequences." But Davis was beyond reason. "Listen, I hate your guts. I don't want to work with you for even a moment longer. That's why I gotta crush you." She stepped towards him, her eyes burning with rage. She slapped him hard across the cheek, the force of the blow sending him reeling. "Regret making an enemy out of me?" she hissed, her voice laced with venomous satisfaction. Then, with a cruel smile, she turned to her men. "Now then, it's your turn. Y'all better do a good job, you hear?" The 7 men approached Bob, their heavy footsteps echoing in the room. They were going to make him pay for crossing Davis. He was cornered, terrified. But something about the way the men were looking at him, it felt off. They weren't just looking at him with anger, but with curiosity. One of the men, the sneering one, stepped forward, his eyes fixated on Bob's chest. "Hey, isn't this the same as a bro's necklace?" He pointed a finger, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Is it a coincidence?" The other men, their faces a mix of confusion and fear, turned their attention to Bob's chest. Their eyes widened. It was as if they'd seen a ghost. "What? No way, that can't be." The second biggest man stammered, his eyes glued to the necklace. "I mean, the boss said he had that specially made." "No, this isn't the same one. It's the one the Kappa was wearing, isn't it?" the sneering man said, his voice barely a whisper. "Why do you have it?" Bob stared back at them, his heart racing. He knew what they were talking about. The necklace, the one they were all staring at, was the symbol of the Martinez family, a powerful mafia clan. And it was his. "There's no way that's possible." The second biggest man kept denying it, his eyes darting back and forth between Bob and the necklace. "He always kept that necklace close and cherished it." "Could something have happened to bro?" The biggest man, his face pale with fear, started getting confused and panicking. And then, in that instant, everything changed. The 7 men froze, their eyes widening in shock and fear. The sneering man, his sneering gone, was now staring at Bob with a look of pure terror. "Shut up," Bob said, his voice low and dangerous. "You still don't get it." He brushed his bangs out of his eyes, revealing his true face, the face of a man who had been hiding in plain sight. "How many years have you guys been my soldiers?" he asked, his voice cold and steely. The 7 men were frozen in place, their faces contorted in disbelief. "You're kidding, right?" Thompson, the second biggest man, stammered. The men were all staring at him, their fear palpable. They knew they had made a grave mistake. "Actually, I'm the capo of a mafia family called the Martinez family," Bob said, his voice resonating with power. "And my real father is the boss of the Martinez family." The men gasped in horror. They couldn't believe it. The man they had been about to punish was the capo of the Martinez family. "On my father's orders, I also work as a company employee during the day until I will turn 35, he continued. "But only some members of the Martinez family know about that. Even those who know don't necessarily know which company I work for. So you got jealous of me on your own, wanted to scare me, and it backfired on you," Bob said, his eyes burning with cold fury. "I didn't do anything. I didn't want the mafia members to know I was working as a company employee, so this is a real pain for me." The room, once filled with the oppressive weight of fear, now buzzed with a different kind of energy. The 7 men, their faces contorted in a mix of shock and awe, trembled before Bob. They had been about to punish him, but now they were on their knees, begging for forgiveness. "I never dreamed it was a capo," Smith, the sneering man, said, his voice choked with fear. "I'm truly sorry." The other 6 men echoed his apology, their voices filled with genuine remorse. They had been willing to follow Davis's orders, to inflict pain and suffering on someone they thought was weak and vulnerable. But now, they knew the truth. And the fear they felt was as potent as the power they had underestimated. Davis, who had been watching this turn of events unfold with a mixture of disbelief and terror, finally found her voice. "What? What's going on?" she shrieked, her eyes darting wildly between Bob and her men. "Why is someone like that working at our company?" Bob smirked, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "My father told me to work. By the way, the CEO knows about this. Apparently my old man and the CEO are old friends." He was enjoying her bewilderment, the way her composure crumbled in the face of his revelation. She had tried to use him, to manipulate him, and now she was caught in her own web of deceit. "So, you and these guys were in cahoots from the start, and I was set up," Davis sputtered, her voice laced with anger and resentment. Bob shook his head. No, we didn't know about each other. Right, Smith?" Smith, still trembling, managed a weak nod. "Yes, I just found out now. So you got jealous of me on your own. Wanted to scare me and it backfired on you," Bob said, his voice low and menacing. "I didn't do anything." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But if I had known you were someone in a high position, I wouldn't have done this. I thought I was in a higher position than you. So I thought I had to properly educate my subordinate." Davis, her face pale, started to realize the gravity of her mistake. She had tried to intimidate a man who was far more powerful than she could ever imagine. "Huh? This is education? Are you mocking education?" Bob challenged her, his eyes cold and unforgiving. "You were trying to use these guys to get rid of me, your subordinate, from the company, weren't you? How is that education?" Davis, her voice a mere whisper, finally conceded. "I'm sorry. You're right. I certainly thought you were in my way and wished you would be scared of me and quit the company. But this isn't education at all. I'm truly sorry. I was out of line." She apologized profusely, her demeanor showing genuine remorse. She had never thought she would face such a powerful adversary, a man who could make her tremble with fear. "I'm glad you understand," Bob said, his voice laced with a hint of amusement. "What do you think I was gonna say?" He paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. "I'm sorry, but no matter how much you apologize, I have no intention of forgiving you." He had tasted the power of her fear, and he wanted to savor it. He had been bullied and harassed, and now it was his turn to turn the tables. "My comfortable work life became stressful the moment you became department head," Bob said, his voice hardening. "I wanted to get rid of you far more than you did me. But do you know why I didn't?" He leaned in, his eyes boring into hers. "Because I have more common sense than you." He had been playing the role of a meek employee, a man who was easily intimidated. But beneath that facade, he was a predator, a man who knew how to strike when the time was right. "I thought I'd show you up with my results at work as a proper member of society," he continued. "But you were different." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. "I'll be blunt. You're the festering wound of that company. I realize that clearly today." His words were a dagger, piercing her pride and exposing her true nature. She had tried to use her position of power to intimidate and manipulate him, but she had underestimated him. "So, I'm gonna let out all the stress that's built up because of you today," he said, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "Wait, give me a chance." He paused, letting a faint chuckle escape his lips. "It's like I've been giving you chances this whole time. What are you saying now?" He turned to his men, his eyes blazing with intensity. "Hank Smith, come here for a sec." Smith, still visibly shaken, approached him, his eyes cast down. "Yes. What is it?" "You're the oldest of the 7 guys gathered here today, right?" Bob said, his voice laced with a hint of amusement. "So there's no mistake that you're in charge of this request, right?" Smith nodded, his voice barely audible. "Yes. I came here as the person in charge." "All right, then this is an order from the capo," Bob said, his voice dripping with power. "Change the target to the lady boss here. Got it?" Smith, his face a mask of fear and confusion, stammered a reply. "Understood." Bob turned back to his men. "Hey, everyone, did you hear that? The target is the lady boss here. Got it? Got it?" Thompson, the second biggest man, stepped forward, his eyes burning with a mixture of rage and fear. "We won't let this woman get away no matter what." He glared at Davis, his voice thick with menace. "Hey, lady, you've got some nerve causing trouble for our capo. Let's settle this." Davis, her legs trembling, took a step back, her eyes wide with terror. She had been the one in control, the one wielding the power, but now the roles had been reversed. "Well, sir, the main objective of this request was to scare them," Smith said, his voice laced with a hint of hesitation. "But what should we do? There's no point in scaring a woman like this anymore, right?" Bob nodded, his eyes filled with a glint of mischief. "Yeah, you're right. It's not really fun to just scare her. Rather than scaring her, we gotta make her reflect properly." "That's true. Then how about this?" He leaned in close to Smith's ear, his voice a low rumble. "I think if we do this to her, she'll definitely reflect." Smith, his eyes widening with anticipation, nodded enthusiastically. "Ooh, that's good. Let's do that." "Yes, then we'll quickly prepare," Bob said, his eyes fixed on Davis, who was now cowering in the corner of the room. "Hey, everyone, take the woman and let's go outside. Get the car ready." The men, their faces now contorted with a mix of fear and anticipation, quickly took Davis into custody. They led her out of the room, her hands tied behind her back, her eyes wide with terror. "The car's ready," Johnson, the biggest man, announced in a gruff voice. "All right, got it," Smith said, his voice laced with a hint of malicious glee. "Then let's go, old hag." He grabbed Davis by the arm and pulled her towards the door, her legs struggling to keep pace with his forceful stride. "What should we do, sir?" Thompson asked, his eyes peering at Bob's face. "You're welcome to come with us, or you can return to the company." Bob, his eyes fixed on Davis's retreating form, smirked. "I think I'll come along. I'll let the company know. Is there room for me in a car? We came in 3 cars today, so there's plenty of room. Please ride in my car," Thompson said, his voice laced with a hint of deference. Bob nodded, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. He was ready to take Davis on a journey of reflection, a journey that would be far more painful and humiliating than anything she could have imagined. The men piled into their cars, Davis sitting in the back seat of Thompson's car, her face obscured by a blindfold. As they drove, Bob felt a sense of exhilaration coursing through his veins. He had been playing the role of the victim for too long, and now he was finally taking control. They drove for what seemed like hours, the sound of the engine a steady hum in the background. Finally, they arrived at their destination. It was a secluded beach, the waves crashing against the shore, the salty air stinging their nostrils. The men led Davis out of the car, her hands still tied behind her back, her blindfold still in place. They took her to the edge of the beach, where the sand met the water. "Where are we?" Davis asked, her voice trembling with fear. "You'll know when we get there," Smith said, his voice laced with a hint of amusement. "Hurry up and go." Davis tried to resist, but the men were too strong for her. They pushed her towards the water, her feet sinking into the soft sand. "Why there? It's obviously to punish me, ain't it?" Davis said, her voice barely a whisper. "Punish me how? Obviously, we're gonna have you sink now, what?" She was struggling to comprehend what was happening, her mind racing with fear and confusion. "You're kidding, right?" she said, her voice rising in desperation. "No way! I'm kidding! We're gonna do this properly! No way! Please stop! There's no way we'll stop!" The men, their faces now contorted with malicious glee, grabbed her by the arms, forcing her to face the ocean. "Come on, Johnson. Take her," Smith commanded, his voice dripping with sadistic pleasure. "Jess, let's go." "No." Johnson, his hands calloused and strong, took Davis by the waist, pulling her towards the water. She struggled to break free, her legs flailing wildly, but it was no use. She was being dragged towards the ocean, the cold water lapping at her feet, the salty air filling her nostrils. Bob, standing a safe distance away, watched as Davis was being forced into the water. He watched as her eyes widened with terror, her face contorted in fear, her body shaking uncontrollably. He could see the fear in her eyes, the way her body trembled with each step she took towards the water. "Smith, you were a bad kid back in the day, right?" Bob said, his voice laced with a hint of amusement. "I can believe you came up with this." Smith, his face flushed with excitement, chuckled. "No, I was told I was a pretty serious kid. Maybe I became a bad kid as an adult as a reaction to that." "I see," Bob said, his eyes fixed on Davis, who was now completely submerged in the water, her head barely visible above the surface. "That pattern." He was enjoying the spectacle, the way Davis's fear was escalating, the way her body was succumbing to the cold water, the way her screams were being swallowed by the crashing waves. He had wanted to make her pay, and he was doing it in the most humiliating and painful way imaginable. He had never thought he would be capable of such cruelty, but Davis had pushed him too far, and now he was making her pay for her sins. "But we gotta do this properly," Smith said, his eyes burning with a mixture of cruelty and excitement. "No way we'll stop. Come on, Johnson, take her. Jess, let's go." "No." Johnson, his face a mask of ruthless determination, grabbed Davis by the waist, pulling her deeper into the water. She was struggling to stay afloat, her hands flailing wildly, her body trembling with fear. She was drowning, her screams swallowed by the crashing waves. Bob, watching the scene unfold before his eyes, felt a surge of power coursing through his veins. He had never felt this powerful before, this capable of manipulating and controlling others. He had been a victim for too long, and now he was finally the one in charge. He watched as Johnson dragged Davis further into the water, her body growing weaker, her screams turning into gasps, her eyes filling with terror. He watched as she struggled against his grip, her limbs flailing wildly, her body becoming limp. He watched as the waves crashed over her head, burying her beneath the surface. And then, he watched as she disappeared beneath the waves, her body swallowed by the ocean, her screams silenced forever. Bob turned away from the scene, his face contorted with a mixture of satisfaction and disgust. He had taken his revenge, and he had done it in a way that would forever scar his victim's memory. He had made her pay for her sins, and he had done it with the same merciless efficiency that he used in the underworld. He had been a victim, but now he was a victor. He had been a pawn, but now he was the king. He had been a shadow, but now he was the light. And he had done it all for one simple reason, because he had been wronged, and he had made sure that his wrongdoer would pay the ultimate price. The men gathered around him, their faces filled with awe and admiration. They had never seen him like this before. So powerful, so ruthless, so capable of inflicting pain and suffering. "Smith, you were a bad kid back in the day, right?" Bob said, his voice laced with a hint of amusement. "I can believe you came up with this." Smith, his face flushed with excitement, chuckled. "No, I was told I was a pretty serious kid. Maybe I became a bad kid as an adult as a reaction to that." "I see," Bob said, his eyes fixed on the spot where Davis had disappeared beneath the waves. That pattern. He had done it. He had finally tasted power and he liked it. He had tasted vengeance and he craved more. He had been a shadow, but now he was the light, and he was ready to shine.